Hey, what's up? So I built this shed back in August for Roberta's aunt, but I had so much else to show first, so I'm just getting around to editing it. So here we go. So we're going to start with the foundation, as is the logical first step. You can see the ground sloped away from the garage, and we needed to get it flat, like this. So after a bunch of math, I came up with this. The timbers I'm using are 4x6s. They'll be fastened together, and then I can stake them into the ground to prevent movement. Now let's start on the first layer. I measured out from the garage so I know where to start digging for that first timber. Before I decided to film this, I had already dug out the outline for where the timbers were going to go, as well as moved a bunch of the soil from the high point to the low point to make it easier to level. I'm just skimming off the surface down to the depth I need so that the timber will sit on undisturbed soil, and checking periodically to make sure it's staying level. Now that I got both sides done, I can place this end and make sure everything's all level, and then I can secure it all together. I'm going to use what's known as a half-lap joint to lock these timbers together. The method I'm using isn't the best, but I don't have tools big enough to deal with the 4x6 timbers, so I'm just using my miter saw. I set it so that the blade stops halfway through the timber, and then I just make multiple cuts about 1/4 inch apart. Then I clear the remaining flaps away and use the chisel to flatten everything off. Here you can see how the half-lap joint actually works. They just fit together, and then I'll use 4-inch lag screws to secure it. A tip for making sure you have 90-degree angles is called the 3-4-5 method, where you measure 3 feet on one timber, 4 feet on the other timber, and then you measure those marks, and that should equal 5 feet. And if it doesn't, you can adjust as necessary. I removed too much soil here, so I'm backfilling so that we can start laying the next layer. Here I'm trying to compact the soil so that once I put the timber on it, there isn't any settling. And once that's all flush, I can start laying the second layer of timbers. Now I can secure both layers of the timbers together using 8-inch lag screws. And then I'll drill 1/2-inch holes all the way through, and then I'll pound rebar through that 2 feet into the ground. And that'll lock everything in place and prevent shifting. I had one that hit a large rock, so I just had to cut off about 6 inches of that rebar. All right, the frame of the foundation is complete. That looks pretty sturdy, huh? Off camera, I leveled the soil out and then put down a thick layer of weed barrier. Now the hard part. Hard work, that is. I hauled 3 yards of gravel from the driveway around to the back of the garage. That's about 21 trips, give or take. So I'd haul a little and then rake it out to start leveling, and then haul more, rake that out, and repeat. I left the weed barrier long on all sides, so once the gravel settles, I can cut it all back to hide it. The shed needs to sit on a floor made of 2x6s and plywood. So here I'm cutting all the 2x6s down to length and placing them roughly where they're going to go. There's also these little braces that'll need to be secured between the joists to provide more stability. I used this clamp to keep the corner here flush so that I could screw it all together. The nail gun is just to hold it in place until I can get a screw into it. And you can see I'm using one of the braces as a spacer to secure the rest of the joist. So the joists are all done, the braces are in place. Now we're putting on the plywood top. The frame wasn't square, so what I'm doing is using this piece of plywood to make it square. So I secure this corner, and then I'll place the other corner and secure that. And you can see it's off a little bit. So I use a little trick to make that flush using that screw and the hammer, and then screw it in. And then I can do that with each of the joists to move it into square. Then we put the rest of the pieces on. That last section I had to cut down. I only needed about 14 inches, I think, to finish it off. And the floor is done. Now for the shed. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. The instructions are very easy to follow, and the shed is simple to put up. So it would help if you had 2 people, but I did it by myself without too much of a struggle. Here I'm just showing all the parts. We have the table full of miscellaneous parts. The black pieces are the flooring. These gray pieces are the siding, and then the doors there, and the 2 gable pieces. And then we got the roofing pieces there. And everything basically just locks into place, and then you screw it together. There's some pre-assembly, like these doors. You have to put the windows on, and there's this gasket that was rather bothersome, but not that big of a deal. Some metal pieces to attach to the cable. Here I'm assembling the ridge beam, and then the rafters get put together. So first is the floor. They just lock into place, you screw them together, and then you use 3-inch screws to screw it down to the deck. Then the sides go up. You can see those tabs at the bottom, those lock in and slide into place. Then each panel gets secured using these plastic screws. It looks really flimsy, but once the whole thing is together, it's quite sturdy. And the rest of the sides go up almost this fast. Then installing the gable on each end. And the rafters go up. And then the ridge beam gets bolted into place. Now the roof goes on. They all just kind of nest into the rafters and ridge beam and then get screwed in. And they all lock each other in place. Final step is attaching the doors. And here is the completed project. I know I say this all the time, but this was a fun one. It's nice to have the tools and ability to be able to do this type of stuff, not only for ourselves, but also to help other people. Hope you like this one. Check you later.